All right. Good morning, everyone. The recording just started, so we're going to record the session as usual, as we did in face-to-face class. Um, First off, I hope that everybody who has been tested positive and is watching this video to catch up later on, I hope you feel better now. Not a fun thing to go through. So we're going to switch to online just temporarily as part of USF mitigation of exposure policy. So that's how it's going to work. You have the chat window. I really suggest that you have two things open all the time when we are online like this. One is the window, and the other one is JGrasp. So if you haven't opened JGrasp yet, go ahead, take the time to do that now. We're going to do a little bit of live coding during the session. And use the chat window anytime to ask questions. So I'm not a professional Twitcher, so I cannot keep up with the chat as well as those guys. But I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat like that. So you're going to see me look on the side quite often, okay? I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat. And once in a while, if I see a lot of stuff scrolling, I'll just pause, and catch up with the chat. So really don't hesitate to ask all of your questions. Make sure that you have your mic muted until you have a question that you want to ask. Okay, when you want to ask a question, you can type something in the chat, or you can just open up the mic and ask your question. Okay, I really don't mind. My experience teaching both online and face-to-face shows me that generally students are really comfortable asking questions in the chat window during live session like that online. Maybe even more comfortable than they are asking questions in class. So I hope this is going to be true again this semester. Just feel free to ask anything, anytime, within reason. Okay. All right. So what we are going to do today, let me go fetch one of the many windows that I have to juggle right now. Okay. What we are going to do today, we are going to branch off what we discussed last time. So last time was the very, how to say, introduction to what it means to compile and run a program on a computer. Okay. Some of the information was a little technical, maybe for some of you. That's okay. You are going to be exposed to it over and over again. This is not the last time you hear somebody tell you about compilers and stuff like that. So it's going to get in progressively, but we have to start somewhere, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to branch off, the definition of program, compiling a program, what is running a program, and now we are going to actually do it. Okay, so we're going to do. Let me move this guy out of the way here. We are going to write a little piece of code, a very simple piece of code. We're going to compile it. We're going to run it with JGrasp altogether. And I'm going to try to dissect it as much as I can. Okay, like every little part, every little component of that code, we are going to discuss it, name it, tell you exactly what it's called in Java, etc., what it's supposed to do. And I'm not going to go like all the way through the details for the simple reason that it's going to take us, like I said, last time, like a course and a half to be able to explain everything you're going to see in our Hello World program today. However, what I can do is I can give you a good idea of what's going on, and then we're going to iteratively build on top of that. Okay, refine progressively the view that you have of this very basic program until it's 100% complete. Okay. All right. So dissecting our first Java program, well, no surprise, it was already on Canvas. Okay, you already typed it actually when you needed to test JGraph. This is Hello World. So Hello World, that's a classic. Okay, just to make sure compiler is working as the runtime is able to execute your program. You type a little Hello World. It's become kind of a tradition in computing, right? So as you can see in Java, Hello World takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. Okay, not counting the blank line because these really do not hold any information. But it takes 5 lines, 3 lines if I was a little bit more less generous with the space, with the curly braces and stuff like that. And if I didn't put any comments in, the red stuff here is comments. Okay, so that might be a change for some of you who come from Python, for example. Python, to display hello world, you type print parentheses double quote, so something very similar to that part here. All right, hello world, double quote, parentheses, and you are done. Okay, so Java is a little bit more verbose, and you are going to encounter that for the 2 courses that you're going to take in Java with us. Yes, Java is indeed actually more verbose than languages like Python or JavaScript. It doesn't have only downsides to it, okay? That means that when you do something in Java, you have to tell Java a lot of information about what you are trying to accomplish. But the other the benefit actually to that is that the Java compiler will gain probably a better understanding of what you're trying to do and will be able to catch more errors during what we call compilation time. Okay, so let's look at those 5 lines. What do we have here? Well, the first thing that we have is the class name. So every I'm, I'm biting my lips here because not every, but okay, for now, every file that we're going to play with right now is going to start with public class and then the name of a class. As a matter of fact, you know what? We are going to rebuild that together in parallel to the slide so that I can play with it and show you other things that are not on the slides, okay? So I have JGrasp open here. For those of you who never opened it, well, you should have opened it by now, okay? But other than that, this is JGrasp. File, new, Java, okay? So it creates a file in this folder here that the browser is pointed to. Let me move that guy over there. And we're going to do exactly what I was talking about here, public class. And I'm going to call this, I don't know, something, okay? So please note that the name of a class always starts with an uppercase letter, okay? Public class something, and then I have this opening curly brace. And curly braces in Java are going to be what allows us to delimitate the beginning and the end of something, okay? Can be a block of code. We're going to talk about those next session. Could be the definition of a class. So what you are saying here is the definition of a public class named something, and what follows between those curly braces is everything you have to know about the class named something, okay? And if I just have that, it's an empty definition of an empty class, right? Nothing there to see. If I have just that in my file, when I go to save it, so when I do file, save, or I do Control S, for those of you who like keyboard shortcut, or I click on the floppy disk icon. So I'm going to do Control S. Look what happens. The first thing that the JGrasp tells me is you didn't properly name your file. Okay, you never gave me a name for the file, so you can see that JGrasp right now is still calling it grasp2 with a star, meaning that it's not saved to disk yet. So I'm trying to save to disk. First thing I have to do is give it a name. JGrasp automatically will check out what is the name of the class, of the public class that you have in your file here. It sees that you called it something, so it offers you to call your file something.java. That's a rule, okay? That's a rule. The rules that we are going to have here when we write our first programs are going to be, this guy gets really in the way, are going to be one public class per file. So public class hello world, for example, in the slide example, or public class something in my live coding example. That's it. That's the only class I'm going to define in this .java file. And that class is going to always be defined the same way, starting with public and class. So the keyword public, we are going to maybe change it later on, okay? But for now, that's the only type of class we know how to define. So yep, we are going to define only one public class per Java file, okay? And the class name here, has to have exactly the same name than your file. So if you say public class hello world with uppercase H, uppercase W, your file will be hello world.java with an uppercase H and uppercase W, okay? If you mess that up, don't worry, the compiler will yell at you, okay? So it will not let that stuff go unpunished, so to speak. All right. So something.java here, by default, if I try to save and I haven't named my file yet, you see that JGrasp is smart enough to give it the right file. So I'm going to click save. There we go. Now that my class is saved, I need a light gun to shoot that thing out of the way sometime. Okay, now that my class is saved, I can actually compile it. So that's the plus button here. Or you can do just Control B for build, okay? And then it's going to tell me no syntax error. Well, achievement unlocked, okay? No syntax error in code that does nothing. That's always a plus. And then once it compiles, so always compile your files. Compile them until the compiler tells you your file is correct. Okay, this is correct Java syntax. And then only when it compiles correctly, you run it. So to run it, the running man icon, or Control R if you like, shortcut, keyboard shortcut. And then it's going to complain. JGrass is going to tell me, well, I don't find a main method or a JavaFX application or an applet or a midlet in your file. So midlet, we don't care about. Applets, we don't care about. JavaFX application, that would be fun, but we don't have time to cover that this semester. But main method, yes, we're going to talk about that. Okay? So if I go back to the slide real quick, what we have here is the body. We call that the body of the class, okay? What is between the curly brace, what we define here, what we have in the body of the class here is what we call a main method, okay? So the main method is where all the action is going to start. So you can have only plenty of rules, okay? We're getting started. You can have only one main method in your entire application. It's a method. Being a method means that you are like pretty much let's view it as a named piece of code. Okay, here I'm saying public static void, so all of those are keywords we're going to talk about. Okay, public static void main, that's the name of my method, and then between parentheses arguments, we're going to talk more about that again. And then the same pattern, the same way that I declare a class and then I open curly brace, close curly brace to give you the definition of the class. Now I'm setting up to declare a method named main. So a bunch of keywords, then the name, a bunch of keywords, then the name. And then I open the curly brace, close the curly brace. Here is the code that I want you to execute every time somebody wants to execute the method main. Okay? And inside that code, we just display on the screen hello world. We're going to talk about how we do that, but it's just one command, one statement that allows us to display on the screen hello world. So going back to our code, we're going to catch up with the slides, okay? And we're going to say, okay, I need a public static void. So that sequence of keywords, you're going to have to memorize it for now, okay? The same way I ask you to trust me for now and move on and say every time I declare a class, I say public class and then the name of the class. Every time you declare a method, you're going to say public static void for now, and then followed by the name of the method. And even if you don't want a method, you need to have at least one method, which is going to be called main. All right, inside the parentheses, what we call arguments. We're going to talk about them later. And then followed by curly braces, open curly brace, close curly brace. Okay? So there are a few things that I should mention here. Some people write code like this, you know, top to bottom. Like this class something. Yeah, there's a question in the chat.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so that string, you're declaring that data type there, right? The argument. Okay.
I'm not declaring the data type, but I'm using a data type to declare a variable.
The
We're
argument,
going to come to that, okay? And this variable is my parameter for the main.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
All right, cool. For the others, if that doesn't make sense yet, we're working our way to that, okay? And yes, these videos, to answer the chat in the question, are recorded, absolutely, okay? So it's going to just take me a little bit of time to process it because I'm recording it using this time Blackboard Collaborate Ultra instead of Panopto. So I'm going to download it, generate the MP4, then upload it to YouTube and send you a link in the module section. But absolutely, those videos are recorded, okay? Awesome. All right. So one thing that I should mention as far as how to write code, okay? There are some people that are going to try to write this kind of code like this. Public class something. Okay, I'm starting a definition of my class something, and then I'm going to be having public static void main. That thing takes some argument. There we go. And then I'm starting the main method. And inside the main, I'm going to be doing system.out.println. And I want to display. So a lot of syntax, I'm going to cover it, okay? But for now, I'm just following the slide. Hello world. All right, close the double quote, close the parentheses. And then maybe I have something more to do in the main. So I'm going to type. I'm going to put comments here, okay? Type. All right, and then I'm done with the main. I close this, and then I'm done with the class. I close this. All right, so if you do it like that, and I'm going to show you another way to do it, obviously, right? If you do it like that, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with typing code like this. It's just that semester after semester, year after year, I've seen students get into what I call curly braces hell. These are our curly brace, right? Every time you open a curly brace, you need to close the curly brace. Simple enough. I never had a student that had a problem understanding that. Yet, when they type code, some students are going to forget to close the main. And they are going to close the curly brace that correspond to their class opening here, but they are not going to close the one for the main or vice versa. And as the program grows bigger, it becomes easier and easier to mess that up. And when you try to compile something like that, Control B, this is what Java tells you. The compiler doesn't let it go. The compiler say, I reach the end of file while parsing. Parsing means looking through your code, okay? I reach the end of file while parsing, and I realize that, I didn't have actually everything I needed. That's what it means. I reached the end of file, and I didn't find everything I needed. So in this case, it's missing a curly brace. You could go to the end of the file and close the curly brace. It's going to work for this program, but most program is not going to work because the curly brace that you close doesn't necessarily have to be closed at the end of the program, the one that you forgot, right? So let's scratch all of this. Now let's do it the way that I advise you to do. That's going to save you a lot of time. When you type code, public class something, you are declaring a class. Okay, open, close. That's it. You won't forget. Now you go back inside the curly brace. What do you want in your class? I want a main method. Public, static, void, main, and I follow the recipe for now, even if I don't understand all the little detail. Open, close. Every time you open a parenthesis, I should have done it here actually. Every time you open a parenthesis, close it immediately. Then tell me what goes inside of it. Every time you open a curly brace, close it immediately. Then tell me what goes inside of it. And so on, so forth. Okay, println, I need a parenthesis, open, close, so that I don't forget. I need to say is a text that I want to display, open double quote, close double quote, then fill in the blank. Okay, I know it sounds trivial, but trust me, you can spend a lot of time trying to fix syntax errors simply because you are not disciplined enough when you type the code. You forget stuff, you think about other things. So the best way to get that discipline, to develop that skill, is to learn to type the code in a way that is pretty much bulletproof. And that's going to help you out a little bit, or at least some of you. When I'm done with that, Control B, okay, compiles, it's okay. Now I can run it, and I get the same thing executed here that I have in the slides. Okay, all right. So we have a special method. So we are going to write a bunch of methods. Okay, we're going to learn to write programs that have multiple methods inside of them. But this one here, that's the one that you need absolutely. You cannot do without it. You saw me try to compile code that doesn't have a main method. The compiler is not that happy about it. Okay, so we need a main method. There can be only one main method throughout your entire application. And the role of the main method is just to tell Java, look, I have, let's say that we have a large application. So I have, I don't know, 1,000 Java files in my application. Each of those Java files is about, I don't know, 2 kilobytes in size. So that's a lot of code. Where is Java supposed to know how to start executing that code? Well, it looks for a main method. So there has to be only one, and this is where the execution of your entire application, no matter how complicated it is, this is where the execution of your entire application will start. So if you look back at our code, what happened when I run the code here is Java finds the class something, looked at the definition, noted that there was a main method in the definition of the class something. Once it was done compiling, getting ready to run it, it located the main method and executed the first statement inside the main method, system.out.println. Good question. Does the main method has to be at the beginning of the program? No. I could have, I'm going to anticipate a little what I'm going to do next, okay? But I could have multiple methods like public, static, void, do some work. Okay, that's another method. There we go, open, close. And that method could be before the main. Okay. The way that Java looks at it is that it digests your source code, your source file. So it looks here and it say, okay, after I'm done reading this entire file, I know everything there is to know about the class something. What there is to know about the class something, it has one method, another method. This one does nothing. This one does system.out.println hello world. And now Java is ready to run your code, right? So now it's going back to the main method. So it finds it no matter where it was written, and it executes the first statement in the main method. If I try to compile that, you're going to see Control B for compile. B stands for build, by the way. I think I already mentioned that, but it might sound weird to some of you to hear me say all the time, Control B for compile, okay? You build your application, so Control B. And then Control R for run. That one makes sense. And you see how there are two methods defined here, okay? And I could do a quick cut and paste. There we go, put some code, if I can, put some code here and say, for example, goodbye world, okay? And what happened when I run this, so I saved it, I build it again, and I run it. You see that what happens is you define a lot of things, but I use only this part of the code. This part of the code here was defined for later, maybe if I need to use it, but I didn't execute it. Question in the chat. So the program can have any amount of method, but does it need at least one and only one main method? You got it. That's exactly the rule. Okay. So only one method, not two, not zero, only one. To paraphrase Monty Python, but it's yeah, it's necessary, and this is where the code starts execution. All right. So a little bit of jargon, okay? Bear with me, a little bit of terminology here. What do we call that part of the method? Everything that starts public static void, the name of the method, parentheses, everything inside the parentheses. We call that the header of the method, okay? It tells you I'm about to define a method, or it tells Java more specifically, I'm about to define a method. Here's the name of the method. Those keywords here, we're going to dig into them, don't worry, okay? But just so that you know right now, what they say is what kind of method I'm writing. And for the vast part of this semester, we are going to write public static method. In COP2513, then we'll start playing with those two keywords and do more fancy types of methods. But in COP2512, sorry, our methods are going to always be public static. And then void has another meaning. I'll cover that like very soon, okay? Name of the method, and then parentheses. All of that tells me everything I need to know about the method, except its code, which is what it actually does, okay? So we call that the header of the method. You're going to hear some people call it also the signature of the method, okay? And then we have those curly braces that I already mentioned, and everything between the curly brace is a block of code, and that block of code corresponds to the body of the method, okay? So every time you declare a method, you give me a header for the method, and then immediately you follow it with open curly brace, close curly brace, and in between the code for that method. And that declaring a method does not execute anything, doesn't do anything. Declaring a method is just a way to tell Java, hey, just so that you know for later, if I ever ask you to do some work, I want you to execute all the code between those curly braces. If I ever ask you to execute main, then I want you to execute what's in the curly brace. So it's kind of having like a repository of small pieces of code to which you all gave a name, and you're ready to call their name to get them to do the work they are meant to do, right? So why is it that in this main file here, I have two methods, and only one of them seems to be doing anything, displaying hello world? Well, it's because of the rule that we had in the previous slide, right? Execution starts always with a main. It starts by executing all the statements in the main in order, starting with the first one. And none of those statements here, there's only one, but none of those statements in the main called upon the do some work method. None of those statements here said something like go and execute the do some work method. How would we do that? Well, let me show you. Do the name of the method, some work, empty parentheses, semicolon. Okay? So what I'm saying here is when you execute the main method, which is when you start your application, right? First, I want you to do this thing called system.out.println, which is going to display on the console the word hello world, okay? And then I want you to execute all the code that is inside a method named do some work. How do I know that this is actually calling a method? Because there's a name, okay? And it's followed by opening and closing parentheses. And you'll see later we can add some stuff between the parentheses, but for now, I don't need anything. So every time you put a name like that with parentheses after it, that means I'm calling that method. So Java is going to look at the code that you wrote, and it's going to say, do I have a method do some work somewhere? Yes, here it is. So, okay, at that point in time, what the user wants me to do is execute everything that is in the body of the code for the method do some work. After the main method runs, can you designate order of other method, or are you just calling method in the order you desire? I can call them in the order I desire. Let me show you here real quick. I'm going to do a cut and paste. Okay. And by the way, you all are more than invited to tag along to code on JGrass. Sometimes I may be going a little fast when I code, do cut and paste and stuff like that. If I go too fast and you lose your footing, please say something in the chat window. We'll take a little break until everybody is caught up, okay? And I'll slow down and scroll back to the code that you are missing, okay? But if you feel like it, it's a good thing actually to try to code along, okay? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do a cut and paste, and I'm going to call that other method do some more work, okay? And just to show you that the order doesn't matter, I'm going to take it actually, and I'm going to put it, you know what? I'm going to put that one at the top, and then I'm going to move that one, I'm going to put it at the bottom. So please note the structure, okay? The structure is super important in code, okay? The structure is this curly brace here, and when you put the mouse over, JGrass is going to show you which curly brace, that closing curly brace is actually closing. So you can see that on line 14, what I'm closing is the start of the definition of the class. So everything I've been doing is inside the definition of the class. And then what I have is one method. So it's self-contained, it's a block, right? Then I have another method and a third method. What I cannot do is put methods inside of method. That's not allowed, okay? But other than that, yeah, I can have multiple methods. They are just one after the other in whatever order. That doesn't matter. And now what I'm going to do to show you again that order doesn't matter, I'm going to say when the main executes, the first thing I want to do is system.out.println hello world. Then I want to call the method, so name of a method followed by a pair of parentheses. That means call that method. I want to call the method do some work. So it's going to execute everything I wrote inside the method do some work. And then after that, I want to call the method do some more work. And I think I messed that up when I said we call the method do some work. This is what's going to be executed because I moved the do some work to the bottom of my file. I tricked myself. And then when I call do some more work, then it's going to call this method here. So this statement is going to be executed. Does that make sense? Okay. So keep in mind, okay, the point is not to go fast through the material, is to make sure like almost everybody, if possible, is understanding and following along. Okay. So please interrupt with question if I'm going too fast or something like that. Okay. So if I run this, what's going to happen? So first I'm going to save the file, Control S, Control B to compile it. I don't have any compilation error. I make sure, right? I check the output of the compiler here. So now I'm ready to run it. If I run it, here's what happens. Let's make this window bigger. It says hello world, then it says goodbye world, and then it says again goodbye world. So here's what happened. When I started execution, Java found the main method. The main method told Java to first display hello world. We got that. Then it calls the method do some work. So here, right here, what I'm going to do is execute all the lines of code that has inside the method do some work. Well, that's one line of code, goodbye world. So that's why we displayed goodbye world. And then I call the method do some more work. So I'm going to, right here on line 9, I'm going to pretty much go through all the statement in the do some more work method and execute them. Well, there's only one that does also say goodbye word, and I'm going to change it so that it's not twice the same message, goodbye word again. And if I compile and run that, now you're going to see clearly 3 different messages printed by 3 different methods, and the order in which it happens is pretty much due to the order in which I wrote things inside the main. Okay? So another thing that helps, it has been helping students for years, okay? It's when we go over code like that, even if you're not following along and typing along because maybe it's going too fast or something like that, then what I would recommend is don't hesitate to ask about what if scenario. You know, what would happen if I change this? What would happen if I do, for example, system.out.println here? What if I do it at the end of the main? Okay. Well, we check. Okay, we experiment, we tinker, we play with the code. This is exactly how you learn programming. So don't hold back on those questions. If I move system.out.println hello world to the end, then it's going to display third thing. First, it's going to do everything that is in do some work. Then it's going to do everything that is in the method do some more work. Then it's going to print hello world. Good question in the chat. You called do some work before it was defined, so order doesn't matter? Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. That's exactly why I did it, okay? I tried to shuffle everything around as much as I could. Like, for example, I used do some work, then I used do some more work, but the first one that's defined is do some more work, and then later on do some work is defined, but even after the main. See, I tried to really shuffle it around so that you can tell by looking at this code that the order of declaration doesn't matter. Now, the order in which I do things inside the method, like this first, this after, this last, okay, that matters. You see the difference? Okay. The order in which you declare the method inside your class, you don't care. Java doesn't care. The order in which you do specific statement, okay, you take specific action inside a method, when you run that method, that order is going to matter. And yes, to answer the question, it is being recorded. Question in the chat, is there a place on campus where I can practice coding on a USF computer? Basically, is there a place with computers that have JGraphs and Java installed? The library, if you come to the engineering building, also we have labs, and those labs are also equipped. I think you need to swipe your USF ID card to enter the lab inside the engineering building. If you want help with that, getting registered, etc., just send me a Canvas message. I'll work with you. Okay, that goes for everybody. Okay, you should all have access to that room by default, but just in case you don't have access, we are going to make sure that everybody who wants to access that lab can access it. Okay. So question, so how does the .java file is read by the computer? Does it just loop from top to bottom until everything is defined and match the execution like printing? Not exactly, okay? That an interpreter would do that. Java, what it does, it takes all of your code, okay? It compiles it, so that's what happened when I click this plus button here or use Control B, right? So now that it compiled, what it does, it reads everything in your code, okay? And it translates it into bytecode. And then when I click the run icon, when I do Control R, it takes this bytecode and looks at it and say, where is the main? Find the translation of the main inside of it, start executing all the statement inside the main, one after the other. If one of those statements is the name of another method that you're calling, then it temporarily goes to the code, to the translation of the code of that method, execute everything, then comes back here and say, okay, I'm done executing the do some work method. Now I'm going to execute the do some more work method. It jumps, it finds the do some more work method, execute everything inside of it, then comes back and say, okay, I'm done with the do some more work method. Now I'm going to do system.out.println hello world, and it displays a message on the screen. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So a lot of you who took Python, yeah, you are discovering something new. So it's not about Python is better or Java is better. It's really about modern programming language are going to either do things like Python or do things like Java or do things like in between, right? So you are just getting introduced to a different type of programming language. You're going to learn how it operates, how it ticks, and then you're going to know both. And so you'll be able to adapt to any other programming language that you're going to learn later that's going to do a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B when it comes to executing code. Okay? All right. What else do we have? So we have the body of the method. I already covered that. I kept using the word statement, and I knew I didn't reach a slide yet where I define it, so I hope that was not too confusing. A statement is it's pretty much you stating to the computer, I want you to do this. So here what we are stating is, I want you to do system.out.println hello world. And by the way, what does this look like? System.out.println, that looks like a name, right? And then open parentheses, close parentheses, it looks like we're calling a method. Bingo. System.out.println is a method. It's not a method that we wrote in our code, but it's a method that comes for free with the JDK. And what we are doing here is we're telling Java, call the method system.out.println, between parentheses, here is some data I want to give to that method. So since the goal of the method system.out.println is to display stuff on the screen, the data that I give between parentheses is what we call a string of text. String of text in Java are always between double quotes. So you open a double quote, put your text, close the double quote. And that string of text is what I want the method system.out.println to display on the screen. So I'm giving it some information. I'm telling execute that method, but at the same time, here's some data that method is going to need to be able to do its job. And that's a statement. That's the first statement we encounter is call a method that does some job, give it some data if it needs some, and it's going to do its job. And then we move on to the next statement. And to separate one statement from the other, in Python, you use semicolon. In Java, you use semicolon. I'm thinking about Python now, sorry. In Java, you use a semicolon to say, this was one statement, and now semicolon, on the next line, I'm going to give you maybe another statement. Well, here, I don't have another, so I reach the end of the main method, okay, but I could have as many statements as I want, like you've seen in my code in JGrass, right? And that's it. So let me catch up with the chat because I heard that there was a question that popped up when I was rambling about this. So if it is not a main method, you can name the method whatever you want, like do some more work. Absolutely, you got it. Okay. Let me add something to your question. This is not what you asked, but I'm going to insert it right here because it fits well. Did you notice how I spell stuff? Those of you who did Python, for example, you might have been told that a name for a method, for example, should be something like this. You know, that symbol that I'm using is called underscore. It's like near the delete key at the top right of your keyboard. So do some more work. I could try to do this actually. I could name my method, do some more work, and when I call it, you know, use that name instead. Do some more work. Okay, compile this, run it. The compiler, the Java compiler is okay with that. And the program still runs exactly the same way. So I can really name my method whatever I want. I just need to remember their name so that when I call them, I know exactly how to call them. Okay, so why do I do things differently than, for example, you might have seen in Python? Well, it's a convention. So it's not something the Java compiler cares about. It's something you and I, as fellow programmers, we are going to agree that, you know, we should not write the name of a method like this and then write it like that, okay? And then maybe a third programmer wants to write it like this with a lowercase s. So if we all do whatever we want, it's going to be really inconsistent. So even though the compiler can work, you know, with whatever we throw at it, we are going to agree that when we name a method, we always follow the same pattern. And that pattern is called camel case spelling. You know, like a camel with, actually, is it the camel that has two humps or the dromedary? I don't remember. Anyway, you see the humps on the back of a camel, we're going to say. Well, it's called camel case because you start with a lowercase, and if your name is composed of several words, then you uppercase the beginning of each word so that it's easier to read. And I know it sounds silly, but this is important to help make the code readable for your colleagues. okay? So that when you look at a piece of code in Java, if you know the name of a method, for example, you know how it's going to be spelled, okay? Each beginning of word is going to be uppercase. That's called camel case. And for those of you who are good at spotting little detail and do that Sherlock Holmes thing, I didn't follow that rule when I named my class. So that's another rule. When you name a method, you use camel case like this, right? But you start always with a lowercase letter. When you name a class, use camel case. So if my class was called something else, I would spell it like that. But you start with an uppercase letter. Okay? And we have those rules in the slide. Don't worry, okay? I'm just anticipating because it fit well with the question that was just asked. So there is a way to write names of variable, names of method, and names of class, okay? And you need to abide by those rules. In the Java community, anybody who write Java code not abiding by these rules is really kind of frowned upon, okay? Let me catch up with the chat. Where can I find the reading assignment? Slides, okay? Beginning of the slides always. Thank you for answering to that in chat. Where can I find over already existing statement like system.out.print? We are going to uncover those one at a time, okay? But pretty much in this first module, in this first reading assignment, you are going to discover, I think, two or three methods that come with the JDK when you install Java that you don't have to write, okay? There's going to be system.outprint, and then in the slide later, I have a method that allows you to compute the square root of a number, okay? And we're going to introduce them little by little like this, okay? All right. So that's a statement. Long story, the semicolon separate statement. We don't use semicolon in Python. For those of you who did a little bit of JavaScript, JavaScript is a language where not all of the semicolon are mandatory. So that can be a little confusing, right? But Java, everything is mandatory, definitely. So everything like semicolon is mandatory to separate two statements. So get in the habit of putting some semicolons every time you say do something, semicolon, do something, semicolon. All right. What else? So we already kind of anticipated. So question in the chat, yeah?
Can the statement be multiple lines, like as long as it ends with a semicolon?
Good question. Very, very good question. So let me go back to JGrasp, okay? I'm trying to find a way to not go into like little detail here. But if I do something like this, for example, okay, do some more work, and then open the parentheses, go to the next line, close the parentheses. I'm going to try to compile this. And that's what Java thinks of my code. Sure, why not? Okay. If I say, okay, so I can maybe, go to the next line here in the middle of the name system.out.println, that works as well. What if I get like fancy and like, okay, nobody can stop me now. I'm going to do print ln, but I'm going to cut it in the middle of print. Nope, doesn't work. So there are limits, right? Same thing with a string. Like if I try to do, and I'm going to try to give you an easy explanation of what you can do, what you cannot do. If I try to cut my string in half, pretty much, go to the next line in the middle, yeah, it doesn't work very well. Okay, so let's talk about what you can do. Okay, and then progressively, as we learn more about the Java syntax, you're going to see why it makes sense, and you're going to understand what you cannot do. Okay, but right now we're going to try to define a minimal set of Java that everybody is comfortable with, and that is not going to cause you bugs. So what you can do is have one statement per line, one complete statement. As a matter of fact, you could even have two statements per line, as long as you separate them by semicolon. See, the Java compiler is okay. Okay. When it comes down to my line is too long, and somebody was asking, can you wrap text in JGrasp? The default is to not wrap text in JGrasp because it makes it look like you are cutting the line, where you can see now that it can be a problem to cut the line. So normally you don't wrap text when you use a code editor, okay? But sometimes, yes, the line can get too long. So how could I cut, for example, a line that says goodbye world again if I want it to be shorter? Well, you have to follow some specific rules. You can cut, like we said, when there is a dot. Okay, you can cut before or after the dot. You can cut between a name and the parentheses, like this. So before around the dot, before a parenthesis, you can go to the next line. When you are within the parentheses, calling a method, if you have one piece of data, don't cut it. Like if you have a number here, yeah, don't cut the 4 and the 2 like this. That's not going to work. If you don't have a number, but you have like a string of text, like we had here, same thing, don't cut it. But if you wanted, you could do something like that, cut after the parentheses. And then even if you wanted, cut after the parentheses, before the closing parentheses, align it so that I see, what's happening here, that this parenthesis is closing that parenthesis over there. That would be okay. If I do it like that, Java is okay. So there are rules, and they're going to make more sense as we delve deeper and deeper into the syntax, okay? But I hope that right now I gave you at least a few rules of thumb to allow you to kind of format your code on the screen without having too many headaches in terms of syntax error, okay? So is there a way to address that? I hope. All right, so a trick there to wrap if you really want to wrap. Okay, so we're going to go back to the slide now, and what else do we have here? So we can have many methods inside the class. I think I already made that point. Okay, I anticipated a little on the slide. You saw me write actually 3 methods total in that program: the main, the do something method, and the do some work method, and the do some more work method. And it can go on like that. You can have as many methods as you want, okay? And this is just another example where instead of calling my method do some work, I called it do something. So here's the main. The main doesn't display anything on the screen anymore. The main calls the method do something. The method do something, when it's executed, is going to display hello world on the screen. And then we're going to go back to the main. And is there anything else we need to do? No, here's the end of the main. We are done, okay? So this is exactly what we have been playing with. Now, what I would like to draw your attention to is, so we are going to start talking about that syntax, okay? The Java syntax, in Java, there are names, like, for example, the name of the class. We discussed about how you should spell it, a camel case notation, and then always start with an uppercase. And then we have the name of a method, like main, okay, or do something, or do some work, etc. And then we have things like public class, public static class, void, etc. When you type in JGrasp, okay, the names, they stay in black, okay, just the same as the curly braces and the parentheses. All of that stuff, name of method, etc., stays in black, okay? But as soon as you type a keyword, and it's called a keyword like public, JGrasp recognizes that public is actually a Java keyword. This is a word that is part of the Java language. So it's not a word that you made up, a name that you made up. It's something that has a very specific meaning for Java. So it's going to purple it like that, color it, they color it differently, but bottom line is that it's going to stand out. So public is a keyword for Java. Class is another keyword. Static, a third keyword. Void, a fourth keyword. So in this very simple hello world example, okay, we already introduced 4 different words of the Java language: public, class, static, and void, okay? I'm not going to go over each of them and explain exactly what they do, because to do that, I need some concept that we have yet to cover the semester. And I'll even need to borrow some concept from the next class, right? That's going to be confusing for most people. So instead, what I'm going to ask you to do for now is memorize that when you want to declare a class, you say public space class. When you want to declare a method, you say public static. And then for now, all of our methods are going to be void. Somebody in the chat just mentioned that the audio went kablamo. I would like to do a double check. Can anybody at all hear me? Okay, cool. All right, just making sure that it's not a global problem. So that if a student loses audio, you can download the video after and you'll catch up. Okay. It went out, then back. So yeah, so there was a problem. So hopefully it's back. If you have issues, sometimes just logging out of the session, joining back again real quick is going to help fix those issues. Okay, so give it a shot. All right, so we are just introducing a little bit of syntax here, some keywords of the Java language. And the IDE, that's why we use an IDE, by the way, an integrated development environment like JGrasp, instead of just a text editor. If I was using a very basic text editor, I wouldn't even get that syntax coloring. And the syntax coloring sounds like a very superficial feature, but it allows me to make sure that I'm not making typos. Like for example, if I forgot the I here, I'm going to look at my code. I'm going to say, why is public black here? It should be colorized. And then I'm going to pay attention. And yes, I forgot to spell it correctly. Okay, so syntax highlighting, code coloring is actually a very useful feature to avoid typos and avoid to deal with the compiler for hours at a time, fixing all sorts of typos right and left. So in addition to the names like main, hello world, and the keywords like public static void, there is also another thing that we've seen in that hello world program. We've seen names like string or system, and now we can try to put everything together, right? These things in JGraph, they are colored in black, so they have to be named. But they start with an uppercase letter. So these are not the name necessarily of method, they are the names of classes. So we have been using already in our basic hello world example, we have been using methods, we have been using classes. In the case of string, string is the name of a class in Java. So the string class is a class that allows you to work with text, okay? Strings of text. So we have this here already. And then system.out.println, well, maybe this is a little confusing by now because I told you system.out.println was the name of a method, but now I'm telling you, hey, pay attention, system starts with an uppercase S, so system has to be the name of a class. Well, both statements are true. What we have here is we have actually a method that is named system.out.println, and the basic name of the method is println, so it starts with a lowercase p, that makes sense. But the system.out.println is a way to tell Java where to find the println method. So we are pretty much telling Java, go and find the code for the class system. Inside of the code for the class system, there is something called out. Inside that thing called out, there is a method called println. So it's a way to name your method, to give the full name of your method, including the location of which class is it located in right now. Like our main method here, for example, well, that main method is located inside the class hello world. Okay, so there's no benefit to that, but if I wanted, I could call it hello world.main. Okay, so it's just having like the full name of the method, including its location in the code, or just a short name of the method. Is it the same thing as dot notation? Yes. Those of you who are familiar with the term dot notation, like you learned it in Python or whatever, this is exactly what we are using here. Okay. Those of you who are not familiar with dot notation, don't sweat it. Okay. I'm giving you exactly the amount of information that you need to get started right now. And then progressively in the class, we are going to name things, with proper terminology, and we are going to dig much deeper. Okay. So we are saying system object out property println. Well, actually we are saying system class out property and then println method inside that property. Okay. So system with uppercase S is not an object, it's a class. And yes, you can use a dot notation with classes, something that you might or might not have done in another programming language that you took before, depending on what was covered in the introduction to programming. For us, in COP2512, we are going to use system.out.println and other method name, that start with the name of a class that comes from the JDK. We're going to do that a lot. And in COP2513, we are going to completely demystify what's happening there. And we are going to write our own class, write our own method, and you learn exactly how to name method when they are hidden inside class and stuff like that, and how to use fully the dot notation. Okay. But for now, if you are just getting started, this is your first programming language, there is nothing wrong in telling me in this class, the name of the method is system.out.println. I'm calling the method system.out.println. Okay, this is a full name instead of the short name, but this is perfect for this class. Okay, I'm trying to do both things, right? I'm trying to address the question of those of you who had experience with another programming language, because that's going to help you connect the dot, and this is necessary for you actually. And I'm going to actually, at the same time, try to provide like a progressive introduction to all those concepts for the students who have never programmed before. Okay, so bear with me as we do both things back and forth. Just take the one explanation of the two that actually works best for you. Okay. This thing here, I said we call system.out.println and we give it some data to work with. I give it the text that I want system.out.println to display on the screen. Okay, so hello world. Hello world here is between double quotes. So every time you see something between double quotes in Java, first JGraphs is going to color it in green. Okay, and that's what we call a string literal. Okay. What is a literal? Think of literal like when you type a literal value. For example, if I type 42, that's a literal integer value. That's a number. It's a round number, an integer, and it's a value that I type directly in my code. Okay. Here I typed also a sort of value, but that value is not an integer. It's not a number. It's actually a piece of text delimited by double quote. That's called still a string literal because I write the text that I'm talking about right here in my code, as opposed to read it from a file or have it typed by the user or maybe build it by putting together smaller pieces of text, right? No. Here it's literally, and the name string literal is literally right here. This is my text. No ambiguity, no doubt, nothing to wonder about, okay? All right, so we call those string literals, and there are just a few things I want you to know about string literals, okay? Because they are going to come in handy very fast. So it's a little bit technical what we are going to discuss about right now, but it's something that you're going to bump into as you make mistakes early on. So I want you to understand exactly where the mistakes are coming from, okay? So whenever you want to display text, like, for example, what we have here, okay? What we have here is hello world, or, goodbye word again, exclamation mark, stuff like that. Most of the text you want to display on the screen, it's going to go without problem. Just open the double quote, type your text, close the double quote, make sure that the syntax coloring confirms this is a well-formed string, okay? And then maybe one day what you want to do is you want to do something a little bit fancier. Okay, for example, let's say that you are working on an exercise, and in that exercise, I tell you, I want you to display, and then he said, double quote, if you want to have a single slash displayed, you better put 2 slashes in your string. Okay, and then he said, double quote, if you, oh, whoa, what's going on? This is the syntax coloring there? Okay, so what's going on is that the way that Java and JGraphs understand what I type, they see that I started by opening a double quote, okay? So that's the beginning of a string literal. Where is the end? Well, I initially typed the end here, right? The double quote that closes my string literal. And then I started putting some text, and the moment I put a double quote in my text, it messes up everything. Like right now, the text is okay. If I put a double quote here, it messes up everything because Java says, oh, your string literal starts here, and then I'm going to stop it the first time I encounter a double quote. Here we go. And then what is this? Junk. This is not part of the string. Okay, Java and JGraphs try to figure out what it is. So it says, oh, if looks like one of those Java keyword. If is indeed a Java keyword. You, that looks like a name. Want, that looks like a name. And oh, look, the programmer is trying to start a new string literal here because it's typing double quote. So this, if I try to compile it, it's not going to work. So it's not going to work. And if you look at the error message, Java is going to tell you things like, for example, in the file something.java at line 4, so that's here, error, I expected a closing curly brace. What it's telling you is that after encountering the closing double quote, it expected you to give a closing curly brace, like the one right after. And if you did that, then Java would be happy. So always read the compilation error message because they are sometimes worded in a weird way. They are phrased weirdly, but they always try to give you a good hint about what's wrong, okay? What Java was trying to say is, once I find the closing double quote, I should not have more junk after it, like this, okay? So I should find the closing curly brace and then the semicolon and then move on to the next statement, okay? So my problem is, how do I get Java to display a double quote as part of a text? How do I put a double quote inside a string like literal? So I'm going to add some text, if you want, blah, 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 and then I'm going to say, this is the end of my string. Okay. I need to find a way to tell Java that that double quote is not to be understood, is not to be interpreted as meaning this is the end of my string. It's to be interpreted as meaning this is just a double quote. This is just a double quote I want you to display. How do I do this? There's a trick in Java. You put a backslash character in front of it. And you see what happened when I put the backslash? JGrasp automatically understands, okay, so that double quote doesn't count. The backslash is to neutralize the double quote. It's to say, it's not the end of the string yet. It's just a double quote. So that one doesn't count, which means this is going to be the end of my string. The next double quote that's normal, not with a backslash before it, is going to close my string. If I do this, here we are, compile it, it compiles. If I run it, and then it said, double quote, if you want, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So I got it. So now if I want to put double quote around my quotation like this, I can put backslash and a double quote here, and it's going to work as well. And now it's going to say, and then he said, double quote, if you want, dot, 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 double quote. So the double quotes that delimitate my string literal are this one and this one. Inside the string literal, I just want to use two regular double quotes, so I have to precede them with the backslash symbol. Immediately, backslash double quote, no space in between, okay? All right, so that brings us an interesting problem. The interesting problem is what's happening if so I wanted to put a double quote in my string. That was the whole issue here. I found a way to do that. So now, what if I want to put the character backslash in my string, for example, and then he said, if you want to have a single backslash displayed, dot, 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 okay? So now I'm using the backslash. I just want to display a backslash. But since the role of the backslash is to neutralize the character that comes right after it, what I wrote here is I want a space that is just a normal space. But all spaces are normal. Space doesn't have a special meaning in the string literal. A double quote has a special meaning. It means end of the string literal. But the space doesn't. So I'm wasting my time here. I'm saying backslash space. Well, yeah, sure, that's just like space. But look at what happened. Because the backslash has the special meaning, Java is going to tell me, I don't understand what you are trying to neutralize. The other term that you are going to hear and read is to escape. Okay, the backslash is called an escape character. It's trying to escape the meaning of the character, the special meaning of the character right after it. So Java here looks and say, this is a space. You don't have to escape a space. What are you doing using a backslash? So right now, I cannot display a single backslash. Well, I could display a single backslash if I had a way to tell Java, oh, by the way, this here, I don't want you to look at it as a special symbol. I want you to look at it just as if it was a backslash. Do you guys know of a way to do that? Did we have another example? Another backslash? Sounds good to me, yeah. Yeah, you guys are putting it together. Look, so I want to neutralize, I want to escape this backslash. What is the magic character that allows me to escape the character that comes right after it? Backslash. So what's going to happen if I put 2 backslash like that in my string? Control B. First, the compiler is happy. Compiler is happy, we're happy. Control R. And then he said, double quote, if you want to have a single backslash displayed, dot, 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 double quote. There we go. So it's not that we necessarily want to do fancy things like that, but having a double quote, in a piece of text you display on the string, yes, that's going to happen. To use a backslash, you're going to stumble across it sooner or later. So I just wanted you to have a heads up on how those things work. Now, what if I wanted to write on the console, on the terminal, I wanted to write like an explanation on how to do that what I just did, okay? So, and then he said, if you want to have a single backslash displayed, comma, you better put 2 backslash in your string. So I'm just explaining, pretty much lecturing on what you have to do to put backslash in your string. It compiles. Run it. If you want to have a single backslash displayed, you better put backslash in your string. Oh, wait. No, what I meant to say here is you better put backslash in your string. How do I do this? What do I write here so that what's displayed on the console is a backslash followed by another backslash?
2 more backlashes.
Total 4? Sounds good to me, yeah? So let's try it. So you see the way it works is I want 1 backslash followed by another backslash. And if I want a backslash to be displayed every time, I need to escape it. I need to put a backslash before it. Build, run. And then he said, if you want to have a single backslash displayed, you better put backslash, and then I'm going to scroll in your string. There you go. There we are. So this is all we are going to talk about concerning string literals. Okay. This is already a little more technical than I like to be at the beginning of the semester. But like I said, students end up like bumping into a lot of problems with strings, and the compiler yells at them, and they're not sure what's going on. So I wanted to get that out of the way, as soon as possible. And then when you bump into problem, come to office hour, we'll help you. So we've seen keywords. We've seen names of class, names of method. We've seen also a bunch of special character, right? The curly brace to delimitate the boundaries of code, the parentheses that we use after the name of a method, the square brackets. These have been used in our code, but I didn't comment on them. It's when you write, public static void main string square bracket, square bracket. We are going to leave those for later. We have seen the double quote. We have seen the semicolon. And if you looked at the slide, I didn't use it in my code, but if you look at the slide, we saw also the double slash. So this is a forward slash, by the way. This is a back slash, okay? So if you put 2 forward slashes, they turn red immediately, and everything you type until the end of the line is going to be colored red as well, which means it's a comment. Comments are just ignored by Java. The compiler doesn't even look at them. So the comments are only for us. For example, this is the curly brace that closes the do some work method. And if I put a comment like that, which I'm going to force you, actually, I'm going to be laconic on that. I'm going to force you to put comments when you close a curly brace, just so that you learn to balance out those curly brace. And if you type them the way that I ask you to type them, you're going to be okay anyway, okay? But again, I'm trying to avoid having some of you waste like 15 minutes in a row, just trying to struggle with the compiler and getting those curly braces balanced and properly closing one another, okay? If you do the trick that I mentioned sooner and you put a comment at the end of a curly brace saying what it closes, you are going to be okay. You're going to save yourself a lot of time. And it's not just about saving time. It's also, about not making programming tedious. If you do that, programming is not going to be as tedious. Do you have to put forward slashes after the comments after? No, just at the beginning, and everything starting with the forward slash up to the end of the line is comment. Everything before the forward slash, like that curly brace, is still code. Okay, no problem there. So I could put a command here, for example, blah. Okay, it's just the part at the end. Thank you. This is my co-lecturer, Sam. He's going to show up from time to time during the lectures. Okay, I cannot bring him to class, but when I broadcast from home, yes, he helps. All right. So that's it. That's it for like the symbols and code that we have seen. Last thing I would like to show you, we talked about compiling program last time, okay? So I already showed you how to compile and run your code with JGrass. We've done that live together, okay? The last thing I would like to show you is, you remember last session when I talked about javac.exe and java.exe if you're using Windows? Well, then, yeah, these are like executable. These are programs that you install with the JDK. One of them is a compiler. One of them is a Java virtual machine. So what I want to show you right now, and I'm going to just open a terminal window to show you that, okay? What I want to show you right now is I want to show you that what JGrass does is really just allow you to edit your file, to edit your file, and then in the background, it calls the javac.exe compiler to compile and shows you what the javac compiler says. And then it calls the java.exe program to run your code and then show you the result of running your code. So bottom line is we could do all of this in the command line. I'm in a command.exe terminal on Windows, okay? You can do that also on your Mac OS terminal. That's going to be similar, okay? Different keyword. For example, I use dir here to see the files in my folder. On Mac OS and Linux, you're going to use ls. Here, ls is not recognized. So what I want to do is I have the something.java file. I was going to point with my finger, but you're not going to see that, are you? So I have the something.java file here, okay? I want to compile it. So let me delete first something.class, okay, the compiled version. And sorry, I'm used to Linux, so I'm using the command line from Linux even when I am on a Windows terminal. So there we go. I deleted the file something.class. If I ask for the list of my files, you see that it's gone. I just have something.java, the source code, okay? And what I'm going to do is javac something, oops, typo here, something.java. So I'm using the command line. I'm running the program javac. And okay, I'm glad I just saw the comment in the chat window. Yeah, I'm glad that your bird is not seeing the cat and getting scared as well. So sorry about that. So I'm using javac, the compiler, right? And I'm telling it, go and compile the something.java file. There we go. It's compiled. So what happened? Now the something.class file has been created. And if I want to run that program, I use just the Java command, okay? And I say, why don't you execute the class something? So I just put the name of the class, right? And it's going to find something.class in my folder, find inside the class something the main method, and execute it just the same way, okay? So that is just to show you, to kind of demystify, what's happening with JGrass. I have a question in chat, right? So go ahead, take the mic.
Hey, can you repeat that one more time? Just can you scroll up on the command line?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did is I did two things, right? Let me like start back here and erase something.class. Okay. So let's start here. What I have in my folder, something.java, no something.class. So the first thing I did is use a javac program. So I could have called it javac.exe, you could call it javac in Windows, okay? And I told it, compile for me something.java. Here we are. It compiled, it said nothing, which means the file is correct. And then if I look, I have a something.class file right here, okay? Right over here. There we go. So now I want to run my file. So the command to run is java.exe. This is a Java virtual machine, and I tell it, why don't you run the class something? So it's going to look in the current folder. It's going to find something.class. It's going to look inside something.class, try to find a main method, and then execute the statement inside the main method, just like we did in JGrass. And the output will be the same than JGrasp. Okay.
With the Java keyword in the command line, can you use Java exe or just Java?
You should be able to use java.exe. Okay, let me double check, except if things changed since last time. But yep, you can definitely use java.exe. You can use javac.exe on Windows, and you can say, I want to compile something.java, and it's going to compile it. Okay, and just to show you, if I had a syntax error in my file, so let me go back to my file, and you know what? I'm going to just do a random syntax error. I'm going to remove that opening curly brace. So there's a missing curly brace here at the end of the line. Okay, I save my file to disk, and then I go back to the command line, and I say, so let me show you first what JGrasp would do, right? If I try to compile, blah, 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 I expected something, but I didn't find it in your code, you forgot something. And if I try to compile it, javac something.java, same thing, exact same error, right? So JGrasp is just a front end, and I'm running already a minute late, so sorry about that. But JGrasp, what I wanted you to get from that is that it's just a front end. It edits your Java files, and then it uses the compiler underneath, without you having to go to the command line, and show you what the compiler says, and then show you what happens when you run your code. Question in the chat real quick. So the command Java just opens, displays the file, and javac compiles it. So the command Java doesn't display the file itself, but it runs the file, which ends up doing things on the screen, like displaying, for example, messages. Our class is going to be virtual for the remainder of the semester. I'm still looking into that, but no, they are not going to be virtual for the remainder of the semester. That I can guarantee you. The question is, I need to get updated on how long is the period during which USF policy makes us switch to online when there has been some COVID positive cases in the class. Okay, so last semester it was 2 weeks. So I'm going to count this week because Monday we didn't have class. So that's 1 week. It's possible that next week we do again 2 more sessions online before we resume in person, and I will keep you updated by announcement if that's the case. Okay. So no matter what, there will be an announcement on Piazza explaining, way before we have class again Monday. All right. All right, I'm going to stop the recording here, but I'm not going anywhere. So if you have questions, please hang around 5 minutes. Okay, I'll be there, and I'm going to try to address your question. And thank you everyone for first listening, staying until the end. Those of you who are watching the video, if you watch until the end, you get kudos points, right? And also thank you for your patience as we are, mitigating things like that and switching back online and then face-to-face, online, face-to-face, etc. Okay. And yes, there are reading to do to this session, but let me stop the recording first, and then I will address any other question. All right, thank you. All right, recording is stopped. Recording is stopped. I should still be sharing my screen. No, actually, recording is not stopped, but I'm not sharing my screen. So hold on. Stop the recording.